Anthropic is one of the key AI names eyeing a potential IPO this year.
Anthropic is pitching its newest model as a meaningful step toward real-world AI agents.
Anthropic is saying it's going to spend $30 billion in compute from Microsoft. That would obviously be through the Azure service.
What happens when those building the future decide they can no longer trust its direction? In late 2020, inside the walls of one of the world's most powerful AI labs, something cracked. OpenAI, the company born from idealism, was changing. Models were getting bigger, faster, more opaque, and to some on the inside, it felt like the mission was being left behind. Dario Amodei had helped architect OpenAI's most advanced systems, GPT-2 and GPT-3. But as the lab grew closer to Microsoft and leaned further into scale over scrutiny, Amodei grew uneasy. He wasn't alone. The company that had promised transparency and caution was becoming something else. Fast-moving, well-funded, and increasingly closed. Daniela Amodei, who led OpenAI's policy and safety work, saw the same pattern. In late 2020, the siblings, along with 5 others, walked out. No press release, no accusations. They simply left. And with that, they departed from the very AI revolution they had helped launch. They called it Anthropic, a company founded not on disruption but restraint. Its headquarters, Dario's backyard, its ambition, build AI that wouldn't betray humanity, even if it meant slowing down the race. No VC sizzle, no launch party, just a vision and a warning. Anthropic embedded caution into its foundation. Legally structured as a public benefit corporation with super voting shares held by a trust, the company's governance made one thing clear: it could not be hijacked by profit. Even its investors had limits. The company's soul wasn't for sale. In November 2023, OpenAI imploded. A boardroom coup meant to slow things down was crushed in under a week. Altman returned. The safety-focused board was gone. To many, it was a cautionary tale. To Anthropic, it was validation. They believed their structure would prevent this very collapse. One of Anthropic's early backers was Sam Bankman-Fried. Through Alameda Research, he invested nearly $500 million. At the time, it seemed aligned, an idealist funding idealists. But when FTX collapsed in scandal, that capital turned radioactive. Anthropic now carried the stain of crypto's most infamous implosion. Anthropic had escaped the orbit of OpenAI. But if they wanted to compete, truly compete, they'd need to build something of their own. Not just safe, but powerful. The question was, could they balance both? Claude wasn't named after a product. It was named after Claude Shannon, the father of information theory. An homage to structure, language, and precision. Anthropic's first language model wasn't designed to impress investors. It was designed to behave. Where others fine-tune their AI with thousands of human labelers, Anthropic chose a different path. They called it constitutional AI. The idea was radical. Instead of teaching Claude through endless trial and error with humans, give it a written constitution. Teach it ethics like rules, not instincts. It was philosophy baked into code. Claude 1 launched with almost no fanfare, and immediately, it stood out. Not because it was smarter than GPT 3.5, but because it refused to lie, refused to speculate. Sometimes, it refused to answer at all. To some, it was boring. To others, it was brilliant. Claude 2 and 2.1 came next. Their standout feature? Context. Claude could handle longer inputs, full books, legal codes, case studies. Not just chat, comprehension. And for enterprise use, that changed everything. The contrast was philosophical. OpenAI optimized for power. Anthropic optimized for restraint. Claude was less likely to hallucinate, less likely to jailbreak, but also less likely to surprise. It wasn't flashy, it was disciplined, and that discipline became its brand. The world took notice. First, Google, then Amazon. Billions flowed into Anthropic, over $7 billion by mid-2024. The company that wanted to slow down the arms race was now one of its fastest-growing participants. With Claude 3, everything changed. The model was fast, reliable, competitive with GPT-4, and in some cases, better. Its reasoning rivaled OpenAI. Its safety still held. Anthropic was no longer just a voice of caution. It was a contender. Claude had proven it could compete. But to lead the AI race meant more than ethics and elegance. It meant scale, speed, and inevitably, pressure. The mission to slow things down was now riding on the back of one of the most powerful AI systems in the world. In September 2023, Amazon made a bet, a $4 billion one. Anthropic would become the anchor tenant of Amazon Web Services' AI ambitions. Claude wouldn't just run in the cloud, it would help build the next one. But Amazon wasn't the only suitor. Behind the scenes, Google had already invested hundreds of millions, and Claude ran on Google's infrastructure long before Amazon's press release. Two tech giants, one safety-first startup. And suddenly, everyone wanted a piece. Unlike its rivals, Anthropic didn't answer to a traditional board. Its long-term benefit trust controlled super-voting shares, staff and independent trustees, not investors. Their mission wasn't quarterly profits. It was safeguarding the long-term future of humanity. At least, that was the idea. While OpenAI scaled and Meta open-sourced, Anthropic fixated on safety. They built tools to peer into the black box. They mapped the thoughts of large language models. Not just to steer Claude, but to prove AI could be understood before it became uncontrollable. But safety came at a price. Claude wasn't perfect. It could still be tricked, jailbroken, and when it was, the critics came fast. How could a model so cautious still leak? In October 2023, the lawsuits began, not from competitors, from authors. Claude, it turned out, had been trained on pirated books, massive archives scraped from shadowy sources. The company that wanted to set the ethical standard was now facing one of the biggest copyright suits in AI history. To the public, Anthropic was the careful one, the grown-up in the AI arms race, but its funding scale, cloud deals, and training tactics told a different story. This wasn't a lab retreating from power. It was a company racing to catch it, while claiming to hold back. By 2024, Claude had become a household name in tech. But the bigger it grew, the harder it became to reconcile safety with scale. And the question no longer was whether Anthropic could lead. It was whether it could lead without becoming what it was built to resist. When Claude 3 launched in March 2024, it shattered expectations. It could code, summarize, translate, and reason, on par with GPT-4 and Gemini 1.5. The safety-first startup had built a model that could finally win. Claude wasn't just smarter. It was everywhere. Amazon and Google embedded it into their clouds. Developers integrated it into products. And Anthropic suddenly had customers, not just critics. Each version grew bolder. Claude 2 brought massive context. Claude 2.1 improved reliability. Claude 3 gave it vision. And by mid-2024, Claude 3.5 emerged as one of the best reasoning models in the world. It wasn't just keeping up. It was pushing the frontier. The AI race had a new format. 5 companies, billions in funding, each chasing dominance. And in the middle, Anthropic, still waving the safety flag, now playing for market share. But growth brought scrutiny. Anthropic was no longer just a company. It was part of a global conversation on regulation, alignment, and existential risk. The Amadeus testified in Congress, consulted with the White House, signed safety pledges. But even as they warned of AI's dangers, they kept building. Inside Anthropic, tension grew. Could you scale a moral mission without bending the mission? Some worried the focus was shifting from alignment to adoption. Others believed that influence required reach. Claude couldn't stay a prototype forever. It had to compete. And competition doesn't wait. Anthropic had set out to stop the AI arms race. Instead, it had become a finalist. The Constitution still guided Claude. But market pressure was closing in. An idealism like alignment is hard to scale. In the race to control intelligence, every safety precaution is a delay. Every delay is a threat to relevance. Anthropic claimed it could balance caution and competition. But in a world moving this fast, can anyone? By 2025, the world looked eerily close to the nightmare Anthropic had tried to prevent. AI models were everywhere, generating, predicting, automating. And the speed never slowed. The arms race hadn't stopped. It had simply added new lanes. In a world obsessed with power, Claude offered something strange: restraint. It didn't hallucinate headlines or mimic every human urge. Sometimes it just said nothing. And that became its quiet rebellion. Dario and Daniela didn't set out to win. They set out to warn. And somewhere between the models and the money, they built something else entirely. A counter-narrative. A company that reminded the world intelligence without conscience is just acceleration, and not everyone survives acceleration. Anthropic was born to resist the tide, to question the pace, to ask whether we should, not just whether we could. And while the race runs on, faster, louder, Claude still sits in the corner of the room, reading, reasoning, listening for the moment it's finally needed.